Hello and welcome. My name is Dr. Joseph Cacciatolo, and I'm a professor of psychology and behavioral economics. I'm very excited to be with you today, virtually, as part of this community of minds, taking aim at local and global problems. As you continue to build the details of your proposals for GovJam, I wanted to share some insights on how recent advances in the behavioral sciences and choice architecture might be used to help you make your projects more effective. To understand how to design a good system using choice architecture, we first need a basic understanding of how our brains operate. The part of our brain that carries out higher order thinking, such as planning, evaluating, and calculating, is known as the prefrontal cortex. We use a lot of energy when we're using our prefrontal cortex. In fact, if we expended prefrontal cognitive energy on every decision we made, we would be exhausted before breakfast every morning. So in order to get through our day, we must have a way to make quick decisions, almost by instinct. And when we think instinct, we think of an evolutionarily earlier part of our brain, namely our limbic system, which sits in the rear center of the brain and uses much less energy. It's our mind's automatic pilot, and the source of our more primitive drives and our emotions. We operate and make decisions using this type of thinking to conserve energy. This area of our brain responds to environmental stimuli not with reason, which takes a lot of effort, but rather it relies on memory and emotion, which takes much less energy, but can often lead us astray. The field of behavioral economics recognizes that we are usually on autopilot, being influenced by our emotions and past experiences. It also recognizes that we tend to make predictable mistakes in deciding what's best. Choice architecture, therefore, aims to design systems that work with our brains and support it to improve decision making. So choice architects have 6 tools we use to design systems that account for our error-prone thinking. They are defaults, feedback, incentives, error expectancy, mapping, and the structuring of complex choices. You may have heard or seen some of these in action before, but even if you've not, chances are you've experienced them as a user. We'll spend the next few minutes discussing the top 3 with examples of how they're being used so that you can use them in the development of your GovJam project. First, let's talk about defaults. The most common example of defaults is the opt-in versus opt-out scenario. The influence here is inertia. We are likely to accept the default choice unless there is a pressing motivation to seek an alternative. Our desire to conserve energy kicks in and slows our motivation to make a switch. Switching takes thought and action, and that requires cognitive energy, which is at a premium. We try to conserve thoughtful energy as much as possible, and most of us will rely on our System 1 processing, which takes less energy to operate. The result is that a default sticks. The most impressive example of defaults is used in organ donation. In many countries, drivers are automatically enrolled in organ donation programs when they get a driver's license, unless they take action to opt out. These countries see amazingly high participation rates on the order of 90% or greater, whereas countries where rules are for opt-in, like in the United States, rates are mostly below 30%. Now, your mind is probably churning with ways your project can benefit from defaults. Second is feedback. Feedback is information that tells a user about their past behavior. The purpose is to help an individual gain self-awareness and potentially change behavior so that their desired outcome can be met. Systems that provide multiple opportunities for feedback are well designed and help people achieve their goals. It does not make sense to wait until a program or exchange is complete only to notify a user of a failure or deficiency, especially considering that a small amount of information early on could have corrected the course and changed the outcome dramatically. If feedback is provided early and often, individuals are more likely to alter course and avoid unwanted and costly outcomes due to ignorance or unawareness. Here's another good example of feedback. The electric company provides me with information concerning my usage and compares me to my neighbors. There are 2 behavioral economics components here. First is feedback. If I only receive a bill showing how much electricity I used and how much I owe, the feedback is not that useful. I'm not sure if my behavior is getting me to where I want to go. With the addition of the social comparison, needed context tells me how I am doing compared to some kind of benchmark or norm. This type of feedback is powerful in itself as a motivator. It elicits an emotional response as individuals, tapping our desire to be better than average. In addition, the bill provides me with information concerning how I can alter behavior to get a different outcome next month. If I make small changes, I can save even more and potentially earn a great rating. Considering this example, excellent feedback would take it one step further. Imagine if you could sign up for a text alert that would tell you if you were using more energy than your most efficient neighbors in real time. After receiving the warning, you could walk around your home and power down items and lights not being used. The more immediate information about when we are diverging from the plan helps us to take steps to correct it and achieve our desired outcomes. Another idea proposed was light bulbs that actually change color the light they emit given the length of time that they are on. After an hour or some other period, they begin to dim or change color, providing an environmental cue to a person that the light has been on for a long time and to act if it's not still in use. Next are incentives. Incentives work by shifting our reference point and therefore how we value and choose among options. Outcomes are important, but they may be discounted depending upon the amount of time that will pass until they are achieved. Therefore, incentives that provide a relatively short-term gain are effective drivers of behavior within a larger system. Incentives must be salient to the user. They must have meaning and be recognizable to an individual in order to be effective. Money is a great incentive because we all use it and it can be easily substituted. It's fungible and therefore valuable almost universally. For many systems aimed at pro-social behavior, though, social rewards are also attractive incentives and can be offered for free by designers. Likes on Facebook, retweets, and other social accolades cost nothing, but can be very valuable in motivating a pro-social behavior. So going back to our thermostat example, consider one that would tell you how much you would save if you turned down the heat by 1, 2, or 5 degrees. The incentive is presented in financial terms immediately and incentivizes energy savings and putting on your sweater. Consider another case of incentives. Two friends go for a weekly lunch and each chooses his own meal and pays for what he eats. The restaurant serves their food and keeps their money. There's no conflicts here. Now suppose they decide to take turns paying for each other's lunch. Each now has an incentive to order something more expensive on the weeks that the other is paying, and vice versa. Literature suggests that choice architects ask 4 questions when considering incentives and constructing systems. Who uses, who chooses, who pays, and who profits? When there are conflicts or disconnects between the players, incentives can be very useful. If I am eating but not paying, I might be inclined to select a very expensive item. If I am paying but not eating, my preferences might be for the cheapest item on the menu. Consider how that applies to the healthcare system. Patients use, doctors choose, insurance companies pay, and manufacturers profit. Talk about disconnection. This system is ripe for incentives for each party to make different decisions. In each component, the decider is separate from the other, and each have competing goals. This system is inefficient and would benefit from the use of incentives. Okay, so here's our recap on the 3 tenets of choice architecture we discussed. Defaults. Remember that defaults are powerful because most people will stick with them. The opt-in versus opt-out scenario has been the most effective use of defaults. Feedback. Feedback must be specific and timely. It allows for small, early changes that help keep people on the path toward their goals. And incentives. Remember, incentives must be salient. That is, they must have value to the user. They must be also made available in a very short term. They should be used to promote cooperation towards an overall beneficial goal when there are conflicts between who uses, who chooses, who pays, and who profits. If you're like me and you just can't get enough of choice architecture and behavioral economics, please feel free to check out these print and video resources for more information. Thanks again for having me be part of your GovJam 2016.